Hey guys, tonight we're going to start with the rise and fall of Greek civilization. So before you relax, take a moment, turn off the lights. Enjoy what I'm saying. We are traveling back to ancient Greece, before Greece had a name, the land that existed before history. History does not begin with empires. It does not begin with kings, wars, or famous names. History begins quietly, with land, with weather, with people who did not know they were part of something important. Before there was Greece, there was only terrain, mountains, sea, wind, no country, no identity, no shared name. A fragmented land. The land we now call Greece was never unified by nature. It was broken apart. Steep mountain ranges divided valleys, narrow plains limited farming, hundreds of islands scattered across the sea, long coastlines with few natural roads inland. Travel by land was slow and difficult. Travel by sea was easier. This single fact shaped everything that followed. Because of this terrain, communities stayed small, isolated, independent. Unity was not natural here. Separation was. Climate and survival. The climate was mild, but not generous. Rain was seasonal. Soil was thin. Large-scale agriculture was difficult. People learned to adapt rather than dominate. They grew olives. They cultivated grapes. They raised goats instead of cattle. They relied on the sea not just for food, but for connection. This was not abundance, it was balance. The first people. Long before written history, humans arrived. Around 10,000 BCE, after the last ice age began to fade, small groups settled in the region. They were not Greeks. They had no name for themselves. They lived in caves and temporary shelters. They hunted, they gathered, they moved with the seasons. Life was repetitive. Wake, find food, prepare meals, sleep. No ambition beyond survival. No cities, no stories. There were no cities yet, no temples, no myths. There was no Zeus watching from the sky, no Athena guarding a city. Only silence. Generations passed without leaving records. Their lives ended without monuments. But they mattered because they stayed. The sea as a path. Slowly, something changed. People began using boats. Simple wooden vessels, nothing impressive, but the sea connected with the land separated. Islands were no longer distant. Coasts became neighbors. Trade began quietly. Stone tools, shells, food. No money, no markets, just exchange. The beginning of permanence. Over time, settlements lasted longer. People stopped moving constantly. They built stronger homes. They buried their dead in the same places. Memory began to form. Not written memory, but shared memory. This is where we live. This is where our parents lived. This is where we will stay. This was not a civilization yet, but it was the foundation. Why this matters. Greece did not rise suddenly. It was not chosen. It was not destined. It formed slowly from geography, habit, and survival. What would later become philosophy, democracy, science, all of it rested on this quiet beginning. Before Greece became great, it was ordinary. And that is where every history truly begins. Part 2. The first civilization of the Greeks, the Minoans, and the quiet power of the sea. Civilizations do not always rise through war. Some rise through silence, through trade, through routine. The first advanced society connected to Greece did not conquer land, it sailed. An island civilization. Around 3000 BCE, on the island of Crete, something unusual began to form. Crete was separated from the mainland. Mountains rose in its center. The sea surrounded it completely. This isolation changed everything. Crete did not need walls. It did not need constant defense. The sea was its protection. The Minoans. Historians call this early civilization the Minoans, not because they called themselves that, but because later Greeks told stories of a legendary king named Minos. The Minoans left no readable language behind, no clear written voice. We know them through ruins, through art, through silence. Palaces without fortresses. The Minoans built large palace complexes, Knossos, Phaistos, Mallia. These were not castles. They had no thick defensive walls, no towers, no signs of military obsession. Instead, they had open courtyards, storage rooms for grain and oil, advanced drainage systems, brightly painted walls. This suggests something rare in ancient history: security without fear. Daily life on Crete. Life moved slowly. People farmed olives and grapes. They made pottery. They wove cloth. Markets existed, but quietly. Trade ships came and went. Children grew up near the sea. They learned rhythms of tides, not marching drums. There is no evidence of standing armies, no mass graves from war. This was a civilization built on routine, not domination. Art that speaks softly. Minoan art is calm. Paintings show dolphins swimming, people dancing, athletes jumping over bulls. No kings seated on thrones, no scenes of execution. The art feels balanced, as if life was meant to be observed, not controlled. The bull and belief. Religion existed, but it was not rigid. The bull appeared often, not as a monster, not as an enemy, as a symbol: power, nature, life cycles. Rituals likely took place in open air, caves, mountaintops. There were no massive stone temples dominating cities. Belief did not overpower daily life, it flowed alongside it. Trade over conquest. The Minoans traded across the Aegean Sea. They exchanged pottery, oil, wine, metal goods with Egypt, Anatolia, mainland Greece. Their ships were respected. They did not arrive as invaders, they arrived as partners. No recorded wars. This detail is important. Unlike later Greek societies, the Minoans left no clear evidence of warfare, no citywide destruction layers from battle, no weapons glorified in art. This does not mean conflict never existed, but it was not central. Power was economic, cultural, maritime. A civilization at its peak. By 1600 BCE, the Minoans were at their height. Palaces expanded, trade increased, Crete influenced the mainland. Mainland communities watched and learned. They copied styles, they copied systems. Something was being transferred, quietly. The beginning of decline. Then something changed. Not suddenly, not clearly. Earthquakes struck the island. Volcanic eruptions darkened the sky. The famous eruption of Thera, Santorini, shook the region. Ash fell. Tsunamis followed. Trade slowed. Structures weakened. The sea that protected them also isolated them. The silence after. By 1450 BCE, many Minoan palaces were abandoned. Fires destroyed buildings. Records stopped. Another people arrived from the mainland. They did not come gently. They were different. They were armed.
They were the Mycenaeans. Pause. The first Greek civilization did not fall in flames of glory. It faded, quietly, and its silence became a lesson.
Part 3. The Mycenaeans. Kings, fortresses, and a noisy beginning. The people who replaced the Minoans were not sailors first. They were builders of walls. They did not trust the sea to protect them. They trusted stone. Arrival from the mainland. Around 1600 BCE, new communities grew on mainland Greece, places like Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos. These locations shared something in common. They were elevated, defensible, surrounded by land. The Mycenaeans did not isolate themselves on islands. They watched the land. A different kind of civilization. Where the Minoans were open, the Mycenaeans were guarded. Their cities were built with massive stone walls, narrow entrances, and strategic hilltops. Later Greeks would call these walls Cyclopean. They believed only giants could have moved stones that large. Fear was built into the architecture. Kings and power. Each Mycenaean city was ruled by a one-axe, a king. Power was centralized, hierarchical, strict. Below the king, nobles, warriors, artisans, farmers. Everyone had a role. Everyone knew their place. A warrior society. Weapons mattered. Graves contained bronze swords, spears, shields, armor. Gold masks covered the faces of dead kings. These were not symbolic, they were statements. This society valued strength. Writing appears. For the first time in Greek history, writing becomes visible. The Mycenaeans used linear B. It was not poetry, not philosophy. It recorded grain counts, weapons, livestock, labor. Administration mattered. Control mattered. Influence of the Minoans. Even as they conquered Crete, the Mycenaeans borrowed heavily from Minoan culture. They adopted art styles, religious symbols, trade routes, but they changed the tone. Minoan softness became Mycenaean rigidity. Religion begins to form. Gods appear. Names that will sound familiar later: Zeus, Hera, Poseidon. But they are not yet stories, they are functions. For harvest, for storms, for protection. Religion serves order, not imagination. The Trojan War, memory or myth? Much later, Greeks would tell stories of a great war, a war across the sea, a city called Troy. Modern historians believe this story reflects Mycenaean conflicts. Not one war, many. Trade disputes, territorial control. History compressed into legend. The fragile system. The Mycenaean world looked strong, but it was fragile. Each city depended on central authority, complex trade, stable agriculture. When one part failed, others followed. Collapse without explanation. Around 1200 BCE, everything fell apart. Palaces burned, cities were abandoned, writing stopped. No clear cause. Possibilities include earthquakes, drought, internal rebellion, invasions, but no single explanation fits. The system collapsed as a whole. The silence returns. For centuries after, Greece entered a dark age. No writing, no palaces, no kings, just villages. The noise of power disappeared. And in that silence, something new began forming, slowly. Part 4. The Greek Dark Ages, when civilization forgot how to remember. There are periods in history where nothing dramatic happens. No empires rise, no great wars are recorded, no famous names survive. Not because nothing existed, but because no one wrote it down. This is one of those periods, a world after collapse. After the fall of the Mycenaean kingdoms, Greece did not rebuild. It did not replace kings with new kings. It did not restore palaces. It did not repair roads. Instead, it simplified. Large cities broke into small villages. Trade routes disappeared. People stopped traveling far. Life became local. Writing disappears. This is one of the most important details. For nearly 400 years, Greeks did not write. Linear B vanished, records stopped, names were forgotten. If something happened, it lived only in memory, and memory fades. Life in small communities. People lived in stone or mud houses, small clusters near water, isolated valleys. Families worked together. They farmed small plots. They raised animals. They shared tools. There were no grand plans, no long-term visions, just seasons. Time moved differently. Without written calendars, time was not measured precisely. There were no official dates, no anniversaries. Life was marked by harvests, births, and deaths. Years blended together. History slowed. Technology declined. Metal became scarce. Bronze tools were reused again and again. Iron slowly replaced bronze, but unevenly. Some villages had it, others did not. Progress was inconsistent. No central power. There was no Greece, only Greeks. Each village governed itself. Leaders were temporary. Authority was personal. If someone was strong, people listened. If not, they did not. Power had no permanence. Oral tradition begins. Stories became important. Since nothing was written, everything was spoken. Elders told stories by firelight. Families repeated old names. Songs preserved memory. This is where myths were born, not as fiction, but as memory tools. The long echo of the past. People remembered fragments, great walls, golden kings, cities that no longer existed, but details were lost. Over time, memories changed shape. Heroes became larger, events became dramatic, history turned into legend. Isolation creates identity. Without trade and contact, communities developed differences. Dialects formed, customs changed, local traditions hardened. This fragmentation would later define Greek culture: independent, proud, separate. A quiet resilience. Despite the decline, people survived. They adapted. They learned to live with less, to expect less, to move slowly. This period was not empty, it was resting. The first signs of return. By 900 DCE, something subtle began to change. Iron tools became common. Populations slowly increased. Villages connected again. And most importantly, writing returned. A new alphabet. Greeks adopted a writing system from Phoenician traders. They modified it, added vowels. For the first time, writing became accessible, not just for kings, but for anyone who learned. This changed everything. Memory becomes permanent. Stories were written down, names were fixed, events were preserved. The long silence ended. And from that silence, the Greece we recognize begins to form. Part 5. The Birth of the Polis, City-States, and a New Way of Living. After centuries of silence, after villages scattered across valleys and hills, something remarkable began to emerge in Greece. The people no longer lived only in isolated clusters. They began building city-states called polis. Not one city dominated the others. Each polis was independent. Each had its own laws, its own gods, its own identity. From villages to polis. The process was gradual. Families grouped together. Clusters grew into towns. Defensive walls were built. Central spaces emerged for markets and assembly. These towns were small by modern standards, but for their time, they were concentrations of culture and administration. Life inside a polis was ordered, even if the surrounding countryside remained quiet and simple. Examples of early polis: Athens, a city destined to grow in culture and democracy. Sparta, a city designed for military excellence. Corinth, a trading city by the sea. Thebes, a city of myth and strategy. Each city had its character, and each city planned for the long term. Architecture and planning. Polis architecture was deliberate. Fortified acropolises on hills for defense, open agoras for trade and assembly, temples for gods overseeing daily life, residential neighborhoods organized by kinship and trade. The design was functional, not ornamental, but beauty arose from order, proportion, and durability. Politics slowly forms. People could now participate, in some form, in governance. Athens eventually would introduce democracy. Sparta created a dual monarchy with councils of elders. Before, kings ruled all. Now, councils, assemblies, and laws distributed power. Debate became normal. Voting became a part of life for some citizens. Economy and trade. Life became more complex. Farmers traded surplus grain for pottery or bronze tools. Craftsmen specialized in metalwork, textiles, and sculpture. Merchants expanded networks along the Aegean Sea. Even during calm years, trade required record keeping, measurement, and contracts. Economy, the local, slowly connected Greece. Religion integrated into daily life. Gods were present everywhere. Temples dominated the city skyline. Festivals measured the year. Priests advised leaders. Religion was no longer only about ritual, it regulated society. It marked time, seasons, and social norms. Culture gently emerges. Oral poetry preserved myths from the Dark Ages. Artisans developed geometric pottery and sculpture. Music accompanied daily work and ceremonies. Even in quiet villages surrounding Polis, life was rhythmic. Time was measured by work, worship, and festivals. Military organization. Even in peaceful years, the need for defense remained. Hoplite warriors were trained in phalanxes. Walls were repaired after storms or minor attacks. City militias prepared quietly without parades or spectacle. Safety and order mattered more than glory. The polis as sleep-friendly history. What makes the polis story suitable for calm, reflective listening? Nothing explodes suddenly. No dramatic disasters dominate the narrative. Life is structured, repetitive, and predictable. Growth occurs slowly, logically, and quietly. One can almost hear the wind passing through the streets of early Athens, the faint clatter of tools in Corinth, the measured footsteps of Spartan warriors on a training ground. The long-term impact. These small city-states laid the foundation for later Greek civilization, political philosophy, literature and poetry, science and mathematics, architecture and engineering. Even the grand stories of heroes and gods would emerge from the calm, measured world of the polis. History, in this case, moves slowly. It waits patiently.
It does not demand attention. And in this slow, deliberate development, Greece begins its rise.
Part 6. Colonization and Trade. Greece expands quietly across the sea. By 750 BCE, after centuries of local village life and the slow rise of the polis, something new began to take shape. Greeks did not rush. They did not conquer recklessly. Instead, they moved quietly across the seas, settling along coasts and islands. This expansion is called colonization, and it shaped the world quietly, without sudden drama. The first Greek colonies. Small groups of families and merchants sailed to distant lands, along the coasts of Asia Minor, across the islands of the Aegean Sea, into southern Italy and Sicily. Each colony was carefully chosen: safe harbors, fresh water access, fertile land for farming. The Greeks did not seek immediate conquest. They sought sustainability. They sought places where life could continue quietly. Life in a colony. Life mirrored the polis, but on a smaller scale. Houses were built from local stone and timber. Markets operated slowly, serving neighbors. Temples were modest but functional. Streets were narrow, winding, purposeful. Time moved by work, harvests, and festivals. Trade became the pulse of the community. Trade routes emerged. Trade was quiet but persistent. Olive oil and wine from Greece, pottery and crafts from local artisans, metals, especially silver and copper, from distant regions. Ships sailed carefully along the coasts. They avoided storms when possible. Each voyage was measured, predictable, and necessary. Trade allowed knowledge to move slowly. Writing systems spread between colonies. Stories, myths, and techniques traveled quietly. Ideas merged gently with local traditions. Political systems in colonies. Colonies often mirrored their mother cities. Athens sent settlers who retained Athens-style governance. Corinthian colonies kept councils of elders. Spartan colonies maintained strict military organization. Yet local adaptation mattered. The new land demanded new rules. Leaders negotiated with residents patiently. Nothing was imposed abruptly. Religion remained central. Even across the seas, religion maintained order. Shrines to familiar gods were built in new towns. Local spirits and traditions were quietly integrated. Festivals measured time, encouraged cooperation, and reinforced identity. Religion acted as a quiet glue, binding new communities to their origins and to each other. Economy and resource management. Colonists learned to live with what they had. They cultivated olives, grapes, and grains, raised livestock suitable for local terrain, recycled metal tools and pottery fragments. Economic growth was incremental, never forced. Commerce moved slowly, predictably, like the tides themselves. Conflict was minimal but present. Not every settlement was peaceful. Some colonies had disagreements with neighbors. Minor skirmishes happened, but no large-scale wars occurred initially. When disputes arose, they were resolved through discussion, negotiation, and practical compromise. This slow diplomacy ensured the colonies survived. Cultural exchange. Even in quiet times, knowledge traveled. Writing systems refined. Artistic styles merged, mathematical techniques shared. Colonies became quiet nodes of learning and craftsmanship, laying the foundation for Greek achievements centuries later. Why this period feels sleep friendly? The expansion of Greece was deliberate, not sudden, peaceful with measured steps, focused on survival, not glory, structured around daily rhythms and predictable work. Listeners can imagine sailors adjusting sails under calm skies, farmers tending fields by the morning light, merchants trading quietly in small open-air markets. Time itself seems to slow down in these accounts, a slow bridge to the classical world. By the end of this colonization period, Greek culture had spread quietly. Trade connected distant regions. Knowledge, writing, and religion began to unify the scattered Hellenic world. Everything moved without fanfare. Everything unfolded naturally, predictably, and deliberately. The stage was set for the rise of city-states, democracy, philosophy, and art, all emerging from centuries of calm, incremental progress. History, in this moment, waits. It does not shout. It moves like the gentle lapping of waves along a quiet shore.
Part 7. The Age of the Polis, Athens, Sparta, and the Quiet Emergence of Civilization. By 800 BCE, the scattered Greek settlements across the Aegean had matured. Life moved slowly but steadily. Small villages had merged into city-states or poli, self-contained communities, quietly independent, each with its own rhythm, traditions, and rules. These city-states were not born in a day. They arose gradually with careful observation, quiet negotiation, and incremental organization. Time itself seemed to pause as communities learned to govern themselves. Athens, a city of thoughtful assembly. Athens is remembered for democracy, but in these early years it was measured, deliberate, and disciplined. Citizens gathered in the agora, the public square, to discuss daily matters. Decisions were made slowly, carefully, with votes counted meticulously. Laws were drafted to guide behavior, not to impress outsiders. Even the architecture reflected calm. Temples rose from the ground in simple, orderly rows. Columns were carved with precision, each measurement respected. Streets were designed for quiet movement of citizens, not for spectacle. Athens taught that power could be subtle, exercised not through sudden action, but through consistent, thoughtful organization. Sparta, discipline in silence. Far to the south, Sparta emerged as a stark contrast to Athens, yet equally fascinating in its quiet intensity. Life revolved around preparation, endurance, and slow, steady discipline. Boys were trained from childhood in both physical and strategic skills. Men and women alike followed daily routines that emphasized resilience and cohesion. Sparta's streets were uncluttered. Houses were functional, not decorative. The city projected strength in silence rather than noise. Neighbors respected one another, and conflicts were contained, negotiated quietly whenever possible. Daily life across the polis. In every Greek city-state, whether Athens or Sparta, life followed measured rhythms. Morning, farmers tended to fields. Markets opened slowly. Midday, citizens gathered for meals and discussion. Afternoon, students learned reading, writing, mathematics, or strategy. Evening, temples and shrines became spaces for reflection, prayer, and community. Even celebrations were deliberate. Festivals honored gods, marked seasons, and provided structure. Music and dance were restrained, flowing, not chaotic. This daily life, repeated generation after generation, was the foundation of Greek stability. Trade and expansion, quiet growth. Trade expanded steadily. Olive oil and wine reached distant shores. Pottery carried stories and designs. Textiles, metals, and tools moved predictably across the Mediterranean. Ships were small, careful, and deliberate. Sailors timed departures with the tides, winds, and seasons. Nothing was rushed. Everything followed the natural rhythms of sea and sky. Philosophy and reflection. The quiet cities nurtured thought as much as trade or governance. Philosophers like Thales and Anaximander asked questions about the world. Why does the sun rise? Why do rivers flow? Their work was subtle, reflective, and unhurried, intended to be pondered over time. Ideas moved slowly, absorbed by citizens, refined across generations. Even politics became a slow experiment. Laws tested for fairness. Councils debated gently. Decisions often reconsidered before implementation. This created a culture of deliberation, patience, and continuity, qualities that Americans today might find surprisingly soothing when learning history quietly. Warfare, not always loud. Yes, wars happened, but they were often contained and methodical. Troops trained for strategy, not spectacle. Battles planned for efficiency. Conquests measured, rarely chaotic. Unlike the stories of sudden invasions or dramatic explosions, Greek warfare was structured, almost mechanical in its planning. Casual observers might barely notice the movement of troops until time had passed and the results quietly settled. The polis as a sleep-friendly story. What makes this period ideal for calm historical listening? Life is incremental, not explosive. Trade, politics, and philosophy unfold like soft waves. Citizens interact deliberately, preserving order. Time moves slowly, allowing reflection. Listeners can imagine olive groves swaying in gentle winds, columns standing quietly under the sun, merchants exchanging goods in calm markets, citizens gathering in public squares to discuss, slowly, thoughtfully. Time itself seems slower, more patient, almost like it breathes with the polis. The quiet legacy. By the 6th century BCE, Greece was no longer a scattering of settlements. It was a network of interlinked city-states, each quietly building systems of law, culture, trade, and thought. Athens refined governance. Sparta perfected discipline. Corinth, Thebes, and others contributed trade, art, and local governance. All of this happened without fanfare, without dramatic upheaval, slowly laying the groundwork for the classical era. History moved forward like a measured tide, predictable yet inevitable. Everything rose and fell with patience, and everything left traces in stone, story, and memory. Part 8. Classical Greece. Democracy, philosophy, and the quiet power of ideas. By the 5th century BCE, the Greek world had transformed. The scattered city-states of the Archaic Age had matured into civilizations of subtle influence and enduring structure. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, each city developed its own rhythm, rules, and quiet ambitions. This was not a time of sudden explosions or flashy spectacle. Life moved deliberately. Every decision, every construction, every law followed careful thought and measured reflection. Athens, democracy in practice. Athens became the epicenter of political innovation, but it was not chaotic. Citizens gathered in the agora not to yell or fight, but to discuss, deliberate, and vote. The concept of democracy was born slowly, quietly evolving through repeated trial, debate, and reflection. Laws were written to guide behavior, maintain fairness, and preserve civic order. The city itself reflected this measured rhythm. White marble temples caught the soft sunlight. Streets were designed for quiet walking and gentle commerce. Markets hummed with conversation, not noise. Even warfare, when necessary, was planned, disciplined, and strategic. The Athenians preferred preparation and negotiation over reckless action. Every battle, every expedition unfolded with precision and thought. Sparta, discipline as an art form. To the south, Sparta thrived in a stark, calm intensity. Boys were trained from age 7 in the agoge, a structured program of physical and mental discipline. Men followed routines that emphasized resilience, strategy, and communal cohesion. Women managed households, trained children, and maintained the city's quiet backbone. Sparta's streets were practical, uncluttered, and functional. Houses, barracks, and public spaces were modest but purposeful. Strength was shown not in noise or grandeur, but in measured endurance and silent order. Philosophical quietude. Classical Greece is often remembered for thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Their work was deliberate, reflective, and methodical, perfect for listening in calm, silent settings. Socrates walked the streets asking questions slowly, probing gently, never shouting. Plato wrote dialogues that encouraged thoughtful introspection, inviting readers to pause and reflect. Aristotle cataloged the natural world with careful observation, slow categorization, and patient analysis. Ideas moved like soft waves across time, leaving traces in minds and books rather than through spectacle or force. Daily life, slow, ordered, and predictable. In classical Greece, daily routines grounded citizens. Farmers tended to fields and olive groves, observing the slow passage of seasons. Artisans worked in workshops, measuring and crafting each object with patience. Scholars and students walked to schools and academies, learning in structured, methodical ways. Citizens visited temples, praying, meditating, and observing rituals with quiet reverence. Even leisure was gentle. Plays performed in open-air theaters moved with measured pacing, emphasizing reflection over excitement. Music, poetry, and storytelling were deliberate, echoing the natural rhythms of human thought. Trade and exploration, expansion without haste. Greek trade networks extended across the Mediterranean. Ships carried olive oil, wine, pottery, and metals to distant shores. Merchants timed departures with winds, tides, and seasons, leaving nothing to chance. Every voyage, every trade deal followed careful observation and methodical planning. Expansion was not chaotic, it was systematic, reflective, and deliberate, creating connections that endured for centuries. Warfare, strategy over chaos. Though Greeks fought wars, These were carefully executed campaigns, not impulsive battles. Troops trained for strategy, timing, and coordination. Leaders planned each maneuver slowly, minimizing unnecessary risk. Conquests were incremental, focused on consolidation rather than spectacle. Even the legendary battles, like Marathon and Thermopylae, are remembered not for chaotic frenzy, but for calculated endurance and measured courage. Why classical Greece feels sleep-friendly. These stories are ideal for calm, reflective listening. Citizens acted with deliberation, patience, and foresight. Life unfolded in observable patterns, not dramatic explosions. Ideas, trade, and governance developed slowly, leaving traces rather than noise. Even war and conquest followed rhythms of strategy and preparation. Listeners can imagine olive groves swaying gently under morning light, columns standing quietly in soft sunshine, scholars walking through marble halls in contemplation, markets alive with calm, orderly exchanges. Time moves softly, leaving history like a gentle echo across centuries. Quiet legacy. By the end of the 5th century BCE, Athens had refined democracy. Sparta had perfected disciplined living. Philosophers had begun mapping thought, reason, and ethics. Trade, exploration, and learning created a slowly spreading network of human achievement. Nothing exploded. Nothing was sudden. Everything moved with quiet inevitability, leaving stone, story, and ritual as witnesses to human civilization.
Part 9. The Expansion of Greece. Power, Trade, in the Seeds of Conflict. By the late 5th century BCE, classical Greece had become a network of city-states interconnected by commerce, culture, and shared ideas, yet fiercely independent. Athens thrived on its navy and trade routes, while Sparta consolidated its land-based military strength. Corinth, Rhodes, and other city-states played their own subtle roles in the growing Greek world. This expansion was methodical, deliberate, and profoundly reflective. No sudden explosions marked it. Instead, slow growth and careful strategy guided the movement of goods, people, and ideas. Athens, the naval powerhouse. Athens' strength lay in its navy, which patrolled the Aegean quietly but effectively. Ships were crafted with precision, each oar synchronized for maximum efficiency. Trade routes connected Athens to Egypt, Asia Minor, and the Black Sea, moving grain, wine, and olive oil in a steady rhythm. Citizens followed routine governance, with the assembly debating policy, while commerce continued smoothly in the agora. Even when Athens prepared for war, strategy preceded action, and plans were implemented gradually and methodically, leaving a trail of organized history rather than chaos. Sparta, discipline, and quiet influence. To the south, Sparta continued its rigorous, slow-paced lifestyle. Soldiers trained tirelessly, but every movement followed ritual, routine, and unspoken order. Spartan society emphasized stability over spectacle, with silent streets and structured schedules. Even diplomatic missions moved carefully, negotiations measured in steps and words, not noise. Sparta's influence was felt not in grandeur, but in the subtle power of disciplined presence. Their endurance shaped alliances, deterred aggression, and influenced the broader Greek world quietly but effectively. The Peloponnesian War, a conflict in slow motion. By 431 BCE, tensions between Athens and Sparta escalated into the Peloponnesian War, a conflict remembered not for explosive battles alone, but for strategy, patience, and protracted planning.
Campaigns lasted years, sometimes decades, with armies and navies moving in measured increments. Cities were blockaded, supplies rationed, and sieges carefully executed. Every political decision, from alliances to truces, unfolded gradually, creating a web of influence that shifted over time. The war was not a story of sudden triumph or disaster. It was a study in slow, deliberate human decision making, a quiet lesson in the fragility and resilience of civilization. Daily life during expansion and conflict. Even amidst expansion and war, Greek daily life retained a calm rhythm. Farmers tended crops while soldiers trained in orderly routines. Markets hummed with the soft sounds of negotiation and trade. Schools and academies continued to function, teaching philosophy, mathematics, and rhetoric without interruption. Cultural achievements were not sudden bursts, they emerged step by step, year by year. Sculptors carved marble slowly, refining every curve. Poets composed lines measured for both sound and meaning. Philosophers debated quietly, leaving ideas that would echo for centuries. Trade and exploration, the quiet web of influence. Greek trade extended across the Mediterranean in a disciplined network of movement. Cargo ships departed on calculated schedules, guided by winds, stars, and tides. Merchants communicated slowly through letters and envoys, building trust over months and years. Cities gained influence quietly through commerce rather than conquest alone. Expansion was a subtle force, spreading Hellenic culture and ideas without fanfare. It was the power of patience, planning, and continuous reflection. The seeds of decline. Even in its peak, cracks appeared quietly. Athens' aggressive expansion strained resources and created unseen tensions with allies. Sparta's rigid system left little flexibility, vulnerable to slow changing political and social pressures. Smaller city-states navigated these shifts carefully, yet the accumulated stress of decades would eventually destabilize the Greek world. History did not collapse in a single moment. It unfolded slowly, incrementally, and inevitably, leaving traces, ruins, and reflective stories for future generations to observe. Why this era feels sleep-friendly. Athens and Sparta act with patience and foresight. Expansion and trade unfold in measured, predictable rhythms. Wars proceed with calculation rather than chaos. Daily life continues quietly, beautifully, and persistently. Listeners can imagine sailors guiding ships across calm waters at dawn, farmers moving through golden fields with soft footsteps, scholars walking through sunlit halls, debating ideas in measured tones. Soldiers training in unbroken routines, the rhythm of drills echoing softly. Time moves gently, leaving lessons, patterns, and echoes for those willing to observe.
Part 10. Athens and the Slow Decline. Lessons from Time. By the late 4th century BCE, Athens no longer moved with the unstoppable momentum of its golden age. Its walls had stood for centuries, and its democracy had inspired countless thinkers, but the city's power had waned gradually, not abruptly. The decline was subtle, cumulative, and reflective, marked by political disputes that dragged on for decades, with debates over leadership and policy unresolved for months at a time. Economic pressures that crept quietly, slowly draining the city treasury as trade routes shifted and allies demanded more support.
cultural achievements that continued, yet with less energy and fewer resources, producing art, philosophy, and literature that hinted at former greatness but lacked the intensity of earlier decades. Wars that stretched on, the quiet pressure of conflict. Athens had faced countless conflicts before, yet the Peloponnesian War left indelible marks. Battles were fought not in explosive moments, but in a series of measured campaigns, blockades, and sieges that lasted years. Soldiers marched along roads, carried supplies, and defended walls with a slow, disciplined rhythm, where victory was incremental and setbacks prolonged. Decisions by generals and politicians echoed over time, affecting alliances, trade, and population stability without immediate spectacle. Every day, life continued quietly in Athens. Families went to the marketplace, exchanging goods and ideas. Teachers instructed children in schools that had existed for generations. Philosophers debated ethics and governments, their words lingering in the soft hum of public squares. Even in war, the city moved in slow motion, allowing historians to trace patterns, strategies, and human behavior with precision. Internal strains, democracy under pressure. Athens's democracy, admired for its inclusivity and civic engagement, began to show slow but undeniable strains. Decisions that once took hours now required weeks of debate, leaving policies partially executed. Factionalism emerged quietly. Some citizens prioritized trade, others military strength, and some cultural preservation. Laws were upheld inconsistently, not due to rebellion, but through the slow erosion of consensus and cooperation. This period is a lesson in how systems fail gradually, leaving records of struggle rather than dramatic collapse. The economy, quiet shifts in wealth. Athens' wealth had been built on trade, tributes, and craftsmanship, yet merchants noticed slowly declining profits as neighboring regions gained strength. Resources that once flowed steadily now trickled irregularly, creating small shortages rather than crises. Infrastructure deteriorated gradually, with roads, walls, and aqueducts needing repair year after year, often deferred for decades. The economy did not crash overnight. Instead, slow attrition reshaped the city's ability to maintain its former glory. Culture in slow motion. Despite political and economic challenges, Athenian culture remained resilient, yet tempered by reality. Philosophers continued to explore ideas, teaching students who carried the knowledge across the Mediterranean. Playwrights produced dramas that reflected society's struggles, but audiences were smaller and festivals less extravagant. Artists carved, painted, and sculpted with care, but the urgency of patronage had faded. These cultural echoes demonstrate how a society can persist quietly, offering beauty and learning even as power diminishes. Why this era captivates the USA audience. This story is perfect for reflective listening. Athens's decline is gradual, allowing the mind to follow patterns without being overwhelmed. Daily life, war, and governance proceed slowly, measured, and orderly. Economic and cultural lessons unfold step by step, teaching through observation rather than drama. Listeners can imagine scholars walking slowly along the agora, discussing philosophy in soft tones, merchants tallying goods at dawn, while the sea breeze moves quietly through the port, soldiers marching along the coast, training daily in disciplined routines, families tending gardens, and children attending school in a calm, rhythmic city. Time itself seems to pause, whispering lessons quietly to those willing to listen.
Part 11. Sparta. Discipline, power, and the slow erosion of might. Sparta, a city built not for beauty, not for commerce, but for absolute control, discipline, and military precision. Its hills rose quietly,
stone walls standing firm, while generations of warriors grew in rhythm with the city itself. From birth, Spartans were trained to endure, to obey, to function as living components of a collective machine. Every citizen followed a regimented life, education, physical training, and civic duty woven into the fabric of daily existence. The city's wealth was not measured in gold, but in soldiers, stability, and the quiet efficiency of a society perfected over centuries. The agoge, training in silence. The agoge, Sparta's education system, is legendary. Boys were taken from their families at age 7. Every day was a lesson in endurance, strategy, and obedience. Punishments were quiet but severe. Achievements were recognized subtly. By age 20, each man emerged trained, disciplined, and ready to defend Sparta, not just with weapons, but with unwavering loyalty. The pace of life here was methodical, almost hypnotic, creating citizens who moved through time in measured steps. The military, slow march to glory. Sparta's army did not rise in sudden explosions. Its victories were calculated, patient, and deeply strategic. Soldiers drilled daily, maintaining formations and perfecting maneuvers over years. Battles were planned meticulously, with generals studying terrain, weather, and enemy psychology. Even in defeat, Sparta's response was deliberate, slow, and disciplined. The city adapted quietly, learning from every campaign. Victory was never flashy, it arrived gradually through coordination, endurance, and quiet persistence. The role of women, subtle influence. While Spartan men trained, Spartan women held a unique and powerful role. They managed estates, controlled wealth, and supervised the upbringing of children. Women were educated, strong, and respected within the constraints of Spartan society. Their influence was quiet, yet profound, shaping citizens, households, and the moral foundation of the city. Sparta's stability was not just military, it was sustained by invisible hands guiding the rhythm of life. The slow decline when order meets time. Sparta did not fall in a single battle. Its decline was gradual, almost imperceptible. Military innovation elsewhere outpaced Spartan methods. Trade networks shifted, leaving Sparta isolated. Population dwindled quietly, with fewer births and fewer citizens able to sustain the rigorous agoge. By the 3rd century BCE, Sparta's power existed more in memory than in reality, a testament to what discipline alone cannot preserve indefinitely. Why Sparta captivates USA audiences. This era is perfect for reflective storytelling. Discipline, order, and routine move slowly, allowing listeners to absorb patterns. The rise and fall of power is gradual, methodical, and almost hypnotic, ideal for sleep-friendly narration. Daily life, military practice, and subtle societal shifts unfold step by step, teaching lessons without loud drama. Listeners can imagine soldiers marching in formation, dust rising slowly along stone roads, children training quietly, learning patience and resilience, women tending estates, managing households with soft authority, markets and town squares existing in rhythm, almost frozen in time. Time itself seems to pause, whispering lessons quietly for those willing to observe.
Part 12. The Rise and Slow Collapse of Athens. Democracy in Motion. Athens, a city that became the symbol of ideas, philosophy, and civic participation. Unlike Sparta, Athens was not built for soldiers, but for thinkers, for discussion, for the slow unfolding of politics and culture. The birth of democracy.
By the 5th century BCE, Athens established radical democratic systems. Citizens, free men of age, participated in assemblies. Decisions were made collectively, debated slowly, argued patiently, then implemented with careful thought. Laws were inscribed publicly, records were kept meticulously. Every citizen could read, write, and voice an opinion in the rhythm of civic life. Imagine stone steps echoing with footsteps, voices rising gently in discussion, the city breathing in slow, measured cycles of debate and consensus. Culture and knowledge, the slow bloom. Athens became a magnet for ideas. Philosophers like Socrates and Plato wandered streets and courtyards, posing questions that lingered, unanswered for days or years. Artists painted, sculptures carved, in theaters rehearsed tragedies that taught patience, reflection, and moral contemplation. Knowledge was stored in scrolls, carefully copied by scribes. Each idea accumulated slowly over generations, creating a city alive with quiet intellectual energy. Military tension, the unseen pressure. Athens's rise was not without tension. Naval dominance required meticulous planning, disciplined shipbuilding, and constant readiness. Conflicts with neighboring city-states like Sparta unfolded gradually, measured in campaigns, in counter-campaigns, rather than sudden destruction. Even the Persian Wars, though dramatic, relied on strategy, patience, and prolonged preparation rather than immediate chaos. Democracy's fragility, the slow drift. Power shifted slowly to wealthy elites at times, corrupting the pace of decision-making and altering the city's rhythm. Political rivalries simmered quietly. Speeches turned into arguments, and Athens learned that freedom requires constant attention, or it erodes. By the 4th century BCE, Macedonian power under Philip II began to pressure Athens incrementally, never with explosive force, but with strategic precision, changing the city forever. Why this era works for sleep-friendly storytelling. Events unfold gradually, no sudden disasters, only slow change. Daily life is immersive, citizens debating, ships docking silently, philosophers walking through courtyards. Patterns of rise and fall. Athens teaches that history is not just a series of battles, it is a rhythm of human decisions, patience, and imperceptible shifts. Listeners can imagine sunlight filtering through stone columns as citizens debate laws quietly, the gentle lapping of waves against the Piraeus harbor as trade and warships move with slow precision. Philosophers in discussion under olive trees, words hanging in the air long after they are spoken. Markets alive but not chaotic, steps and voices moving in calm patterns. Time itself in Athens feels like a measured pulse, perfect for reflective listening and quiet contemplation. Part 13. The Peloponnesian War. Athens and Sparta in a slow collision. The Peloponnesian War. Not a single moment of chaos, not a sudden explosion of violence. Instead, decades of careful strategy, slow sieges, and measured political maneuvering that shaped the fate of Greece. The stage is set. By the late 5th century BCE, Athens was thriving culturally and economically, while Sparta remained disciplined, militarized, and patient. Alliances formed slowly. Corinth, Thebes, and other city-states watched, weighing their loyalties over months and years. Small provocations escalated subtly. Athens imposed trade restrictions. Sparta responded quietly with troop movements, each act measured, deliberate, and almost imperceptible in its impact. Sieges and slowly unfolding battles. The war was not a single battle, but countless skirmishes, sieges, and campaigns stretched over decades. Athens relied on its navy, ships moving methodically through the Aegean, each maneuver carefully planned. Sparta relied on land forces, marching in long, slow columns across the Peloponnesus, exerting pressure gradually. Imagine the sun rising over fields where soldiers move like shadows, steps measured, drums echoing slowly in the distance. The plague, an invisible force. In 430 BCE, Athens faced a plague that killed nearly a third of its population. It did not strike at all once, it crept through the city, affecting markets, homes, and the assembly. Leaders fell. Citizens struggled quietly. Decisions became harder. The rhythm of Athens faltered, not with drama, but with creeping despair. The slow fall of Athens. Pericles' death removed a stabilizing force. Leadership became fragmented. Allies defected. Funds ran low, and resources dwindled incrementally over years. In 404 BCE, Athens surrendered to Sparta, but the collapse had begun decades earlier. It was the culmination of countless small events, choices, and failures. Why this works for sleep-friendly storytelling. Events unfold slowly and logically, no sudden explosions or cinematic violence. Listeners can imagine soldiers pacing through dusty plains, sailors adjusting sails in gentle winds, citizens debating laws quietly. The war teaches that history's power is often subtle, cumulative, and reflective rather than sudden or sensational. Visualize city walls rising under early morning sun, guards moving in quiet shifts, markets bustling softly with vendors, the rhythm of daily life continuing amidst tension. Soldiers on long marches, steps echoing slowly across hills and valleys. Families observing the city from rooftops, watching events unfold over years, almost imperceptibly. Time itself in the Peloponnesian War feels slow, reflective, and immersive, ideal for reflective listening or sleep-focused storytelling. Part 14. Alexander the Great. The World in Slow Motion. Long pause. Alexander of Macedon. Not a mythical hero, not a legend, a young man of 20 who inherited a kingdom and a vision and proceeded to reshape the ancient world with patience, calculation, and relentless strategy. A youth prepared for greatness. Born in 356 BCE in Pella, Macedonia, Alexander was tutored by Aristotle, learning philosophy, science, literature, and medicine. His education was careful, deliberate, and deeply immersive, preparing him not just for war, but for ruling minds and ideas. Imagine the young prince walking through Pella's gardens, scroll in hand, contemplating history and strategy, unaware that the world outside would soon bend to his plans. Inheriting an empire, not chaos, but order. When King Philip II was assassinated in 336 BCE, Alexander took the throne. His first months were spent consolidating power quietly. Noble families watched, rebellions were quelled, armies reorganized. Every action was measured. Decisions were slowly considered, with political finesse rather than brute force. campaigns that moved like chess pieces. Alexander's conquests stretched from Greece to Egypt, Persia, and India. Battles were methodical, strategic, and executed with astonishing precision. Not sudden clashes, but carefully planned maneuvers over months and years. He relied on logistics, training, and intelligence. Armies moved slowly across deserts and mountains, supplies managed meticulously, communication maintained across thousands of miles. Imagine soldiers adjusting their shields as the sun rises, scouts reporting quietly from hilltops, engineers constructing siege machines over days, all creating an almost hypnotic rhythm of warfare. Cities and culture, building legacies slowly. Alexander didn't just conquer, he founded cities, spread Hellenistic culture, and encouraged learning. Cities like Alexandria and Egypt became centers of knowledge, trade, and philosophy. Libraries, observatories, and theaters emerged over years of planning and development, not overnight. Think of Alexandria, columns catching the soft morning light, scribes copying scrolls meticulously, ships moving silently through the harbor, creating an atmosphere of enduring reflection rather than chaos. The subtle decline, mortality in legacy. By 323 BCE, Alexander was only 32. Death arrived not with battle, but quietly in Babylon. His empire, vast and complex, began fragmenting slowly, divided among his generals. Cities remained, armies lingered, but political cohesion dissolved over decades. The Hellenistic age followed. Knowledge, art, and philosophy spread gradually, influencing cultures for centuries. Why this part works for sleep-friendly storytelling. Events unfold slowly and logically, not in bursts of violence. Listeners can imagine soldiers marching at dawn, cities built over years, scholars writing in quiet chambers, rivers carrying trade steadily. The story illustrates the rhythm of ambition, the patience of strategy, and the gentle decay of human endeavors. Visualize sunlight across the Macedonian hills, Alexander riding slowly, observing troops in formation. Desert nights, fires flickering while soldiers rest after long marches, the air calm and silent. Alexandria's harbor at dusk, ships rocking gently, merchants preparing goods with quiet precision. Scrolls being copied in libraries, hands moving carefully, ink flowing, knowledge preserved. Time itself during Alexander's campaigns feels like a slow pulse, a perfect example of history moving deliberately, almost meditatively, ideal for reflective listening or sleep-focused storytelling. Pause. Part 15. The Hellenistic World, Greece in Reflection and Transition. After Alexander's death in 323 BCE, the Greek world did not end abruptly. Instead, it shifted, stretched, and transformed across decades, like sunlight slowly moving across a vast landscape. The Fragmented Empire. Alexander's generals, the Diadochi, divided the empire into small kingdoms, each with its own rulers, armies, and ambitions. Egypt under the Ptolemies, Macedonia under Antigonus and his heirs, Syria under the Seleucids. All were powerful, stable, yet suddenly fragile. Each city, province, and fortress lived in a rhythm dictated by trade, diplomacy, and cautious military presence. Visualize soldiers patrolling city walls at dawn, merchants opening shutters in silent streets, Couriers traveling across deserts carrying slow moving messages, all creating a world in quiet motion. Culture that spread slowly. Hellenistic culture flourished quietly. Greek language, art, and philosophy reached far beyond the Mediterranean. Egypt, Persia, and even India. Libraries were built, like the Library of Alexandria, where scrolls were copied carefully, preserving centuries of knowledge. Scholars studied mathematics, astronomy, and medicine, working in calm rooms with the soft scratch of pens on papyrus, slowly expanding the boundaries of understanding. Imagine astronomers observing the night sky from a quiet observatory, the wind barely moving the paper scrolls, sculptors chiseling statues in sunlit courtyards, every strike measured and deliberate. Economies and social shifts. Trade routes stretched over mountains, rivers, and seas. Goods moved slowly and steadily, merchants negotiating over weeks and months. Social hierarchies adjusted. The wealthy elite in cities like Pergamum or Rhodes controlled knowledge, art, and politics, while rural populations maintained the quiet rhythm of agriculture. Wealth and influence were never sudden, they accrued gradually, city by city, generation by generation. Visualize carts moving slowly along dusty roads, traders counting coins methodically, fishermen casting nets at dawn, the water reflecting muted sunlight. Gradual conflicts. Wars continued, but rarely with catastrophic suddenness. City-states and kingdoms engaged in skirmishes, sieges, and strategic diplomacy over decades. Macedonia tried to assert control over Greek cities. The Seleucid Empire pushed eastward. Egypt remained largely stable. Power shifted slowly. Alliances formed and dissolved quietly. Borders expanded incrementally, and cities changed hands like pieces on a slow-moving chessboard. Visualize soldiers drilling under early morning light, commanders moving banners with careful gestures, citizens watching quietly from rooftops, life continuing around them in measured steps. The decline, quiet, not catastrophic. By the 2nd century BCE, Rome began influencing the Greek world. Greek cities did not collapse in a single moment. Instead, influence waned, trade routes shifted, political independence eroded, libraries and temples remained, statues still stood, streets remained populated. The decline was subtle, almost imperceptible, like shadows lengthening over centuries. Visualize an emptying marketplace at twilight, the faint echo of debates in assembly halls, temples catching the last rays of the sun, citizens going about daily life quietly as change approaches. Why this works for sleep-friendly history. Nothing explodes, nothing shocks. Events unfold over decades, giving listeners time to imagine, reflect, and drift into a calm narrative rhythm. The story teaches that history's power is not always dramatic. It can be slow, cumulative, reflective, and deeply human. Visualize a harbor at sunset, ships rocking gently as sailors prepare for the night. Scrolls piled neatly in a library, the scent of papyrus and ink filling the room quietly. Stone streets of a Hellenistic city, empty except for a single figure walking slowly, lost in thought. Fields outside city walls, farmers tending crops as the wind brushes the tall grasses in soft rhythm. Time in the Hellenistic world moves deliberately, like the slow turning of a clock, making it perfect for reflective storytelling, meditation, and calm, sleep-friendly listening. Part 16. The Last Days of the Greek City-States.
Macedonia and the Roman shadow. After centuries of independence, the Greek city-states entered a period of gradual decline, not through sudden destruction, but through slow, measured erosion of power. Macedonia rises. Philip II of Macedonia, a king of cunning strategy, united the northern territories and trained armies unlike any before. He introduced the phalanx formation, long spears moving as one, soldiers disciplined and unflinching. Slowly, city-states like Athens and Thebes realized that their autonomy was under threat, but the change was incremental, almost imperceptible. Visualize. Soldiers standing in precise lines, sunlight glinting off bronze armor, the quiet hum of preparation filling the air. City-states debating in open-air assembly halls, citizens unaware of the slow encroachment of power. Messengers riding horses across dusty roads, bringing news that shifts alliances day by day. The shadow of Rome. By the 2nd century BCE, Rome's influence crept eastward, first through diplomacy, then treaties, and finally armies. Greek cities were not destroyed overnight. Trade shifted, taxes changed, local rulers became administrators under Roman authority. Cultural life persisted, philosophers still debated, schools taught rhetoric, mathematics, and astronomy. Life went on quietly, yet the world had changed forever. Visualize. Markets filled with a mix of Greek and Roman goods, merchants speaking softly, coins clinking quietly. Temples and statues remaining intact, worshippers moving slowly through courtyards. Teachers in shaded classrooms, writing in wax tablets, while outside, soldiers marched silently through stone streets. Battles without fire. Wars continued, but rarely with overwhelming destruction. Macedonia and Rome engaged in skirmishes, sieges, and strategic negotiations. Cities often changed hands without burning or bloodshed, as citizens adapted to new rulers and laws. Political influence shifted gradually, measured in treaties, marriages, and alliances. Visualize. Soldiers marching in formation through empty dawn streets, the only sound their synchronized footsteps. Messengers carrying scrolls with diplomatic agreements, traveling along coastal roads under the rising sun. Citizens watching quietly from rooftops, the world changing, step by step, almost unnoticed. Cultural continuity amid decline. Philosophy, art, and literature did not vanish. Hellenistic culture survived under Roman oversight, influencing architecture, science, and governance. Alexandria remained a center of learning. Athens kept its schools. The pace was deliberate, reflective, and enduring. Visualize. Library halls filled with scholars, candlelight flickering on scrolls. Artists shaping marble statues, their tools tapping softly in rhythm. Astronomers recording the night sky, noting planets and stars in slow, careful calculations. The quiet lesson. The Greek world teaches us that civilizations do not always end with fire and chaos. They can fade slowly, leave traces in culture, architecture, and human thought, and yet remain deeply present in history. Visualize. Empty agora at sunset, shadows stretching over marble columns. Ships rocking gently in distant harbors, their sails lowered for the night. A lone philosopher walking through a quiet port, scroll in hand, observing time passing. Time moved in measured steps, not leaps. Power shifted incrementally, like the slow erosion of a cliff by the sea. And through it all, the essence of Greek culture persisted.
leaving a quiet imprint on the future.
Part 17. The Hellenistic Kingdoms. The Slow Dissolution of Power. After Alexander the Great's death in 323 BCE, his vast empire did not collapse suddenly. Instead, it fractured slowly, like cracks forming in ancient marble over centuries. The successor kingdoms, Macedonia, Egypt, Pergamon, and Seleucid territories, were carved out by Alexander's generals, the Diadochi. Each kingdom functioned independently, yet shared the Greek cultural heritage. Temples, theaters, and academies thrived in Alexandria, Antioch, and Pergamon. Governance was meticulous. Armies were stationed strategically, trade routes maintained, and royal decrees circulated in scrolls day by day. Visualize marble palaces with courtyards, sunlight reflecting off mosaics, soldiers drilling in geometric formations, long spears glinting softly. Merchants and scribes walking quietly along stone streets, scrolls in hand. Conflict without chaos. The Hellenistic world saw frequent wars. Antigonid, Ptolemaic, and Seleucid dynasties clashed over land and influence. Cities rarely burned entirely. Sieges were prolonged, starvation and diplomacy often more decisive than swords. Power shifted gradually, subtly, citizens adapting to new rulers, while daily life continued almost unchanged. Visualize city gates opening slowly, troops entering without chaos, council meetings in shaded halls, nobles debating terms of surrender, citizens tending markets and schools, seemingly unaware of the political change overhead. Culture as a constant. Despite political instability, Hellenistic art, philosophy, and science flourished. Alexandria housed its legendary library, where scholars cataloged scrolls meticulously. Mathematicians, astronomers, and poets continued their work uninterrupted, even as kings plotted and armies maneuvered. Visualize scrolls stacked neatly on wooden shelves, dust settling in sunlight. Artists carving statues slowly, hands steady, no rush. Astronomers mapping the night sky, ink slowly drying on vellum. The gradual absorption into Rome. By the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE, Rome began asserting influence. Greek kingdoms were conquered piece by piece, often without mass destruction. Macedon fell in 168 BCE, Pergamon was bequeathed to Rome in 133 BCE, and by 30 BCE, Egypt became a Roman province. Visualize Roman legions marching quietly into Greek cities, banners swaying slowly, local rulers negotiating treaties, faces solemn but composed, streets and theaters remaining intact, life continuing with minimal disruption. The quiet lessons. The Hellenistic era teaches that power can shift slowly, almost imperceptibly, leaving culture intact. Civilizations do not always vanish violently. Sometimes they fade, leaving behind art, philosophy, and architecture as whispers of the past. This measured, reflective decline is perfect for USA boring history audiences, offering calm, sleep-friendly contemplation of history. Visualize empty courtyards at sunset, shadows stretching across marble floors. Ships rocking gently in distant harbors, sails lowered. Scholars walking quietly along library halls, scrolls under arm, observing the slow march of time. Time in the Hellenistic world moved like a steady river, reshaping civilizations gradually. Empires changed hands, but the Greek essence persisted, quietly influencing the world that followed.
Part 18. The Greek city-states under Rome. Gradual absorption and cultural persistence. By the 2nd century BCE, Greece's city-states, once proud and independent, faced a new reality. Rome, growing steadily in power, had begun absorbing territories without mass destruction, moving like a slow, inevitable tide. The diplomacy of conquest. Roman legions rarely stormed Greek cities with total annihilation. Instead, they often entered through treaties and alliances. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and Thebes were technically autonomous, but their foreign policy, trade, and armies were increasingly influenced by Rome. The transition was imperceptibly quiet, like leaves falling in an empty courtyard, unnoticed at first, but accumulating over time. Visualize. Marble city gates opening slowly, Roman banners swaying gently in the breeze, Greek officials negotiating under colonnades, faces calm, gestures measured. Citizens walking along stone-paved streets, oblivious to the slow political shift overhead. The subtle shift in daily life. Local assemblies continued. Markets remained active. Festivals occurred on schedule. Athenians still debated philosophy in shaded stoas, unaware that their political independence was gradually eroding. Spartans continued their military drills, while Roman oversight grew behind the scenes, invisible yet inevitable. Visualize. Stoas lined with philosophers, scrolls in hand, soft sunlight filtering through columns, children playing in quiet courtyards, their laughter echoing softly. Farmers tending olive groves, unaware that distant decisions would soon shape their lives. Corinth, a model of quiet absorption. Corinth, once a bustling trade hub, was sacked by Rome in 146 BCE, but the city was rebuilt under Roman oversight, not destroyed completely. Commerce resumed, temples remained standing, civic life returned to a calm rhythm. The lesson: Rome's power often coexisted with local culture, allowing Greek traditions to survive even as governance shifted. Visualize. Temples standing on hilltops, columns reflecting the soft glow of sunrise. Traders setting up stalls in restored marketplaces, exchanging goods quietly. Ships gliding across the Corinthian Gulf, their sails moving slowly with the wind. Culture persists. Art, philosophy, and science continued to thrive even under Roman oversight. Alexandria's library, Pergamum's theaters, and Athens' academies remained centers of learning and culture. Greek ideas, quietly transmitted, infused Roman culture, influencing architecture, literature, and governance for centuries. Visualize. Scrolls stacked neatly in libraries, dust motes dancing in beams of sunlight. Statues in gardens, serene, unchanging witnesses to centuries of subtle change. Astronomers observing stars, noting constellations with ink and quill, uninterrupted. The slow fade of autonomy. Over decades, city-states lost military independence, yet daily life remained largely unaffected. Laws were adjusted, taxes were collected, some magistrates remained local. No cataclysmic collapse occurred. Instead, Greek political power was absorbed gently, like water seeping into stone. Visualize. Quiet town squares, statues of local heroes standing alone. Rivers flowing past aqueducts, silent, steady, unchanging. Markets bustling softly, life continuing amid slow political transformation.
Lessons for sleep and reflection. This story shows that history does not always shout, sometimes it whispers. Greek city-states remind us that civilizations can fade gradually, leaving beauty intact, culture preserved, and knowledge transmitted quietly. For a USA boring history audience, this is the perfect example of slow, reflective history, ideal for contemplation or sleep. Visualize. Sunset casting golden light across marble ruins, shadows stretching slowly. Waves lapping softly against ancient harbors, carrying whispers of trade and conversation. Philosophers walking alone along silent colonnades, scrolls in hand, time paused. History in this period moved like a gentle river, eroding old powers while carrying forward art, philosophy, and human experience. Rome conquered Greek territories without erasing them, allowing the essence of Greece to echo for millennia.
Part 19. Greek religion and temples under Roman rule. Quiet persistence of faith. By the 1st century BCE, Greece had become politically part of the Roman Republic, but its religious traditions persisted quietly, almost imperceptibly. Roman governors respected local gods, temples, and festivals because religion was the heartbeat of everyday life, and ignoring it could create unrest. The temples that never fell. Athens' Acropolis, the Parthenon, and surrounding temples remained standing, largely untouched. Romans contributed funds for repairs in some places, not out of piety, but for practical diplomacy, ensuring citizens continued their worship peacefully. Priests maintained rituals, sacrifices continued, and festivals marked the rhythm of life. Visualize. Marble columns gleaming in the morning light, dust softly settling on the steps. Priests in flowing robes performing rituals quietly, incense rising in slow spirals. Citizens approaching the altars, moving carefully, whispering prayers in the hush of dawn. Quiet festivals. The Panathenaic festival in Athens continued, though with subtle Roman oversight. Chariot races, music, and poetry recitations persisted, providing citizens with continuity amidst political change. Roman soldiers sometimes observed silently, standing respectfully at the edges of the crowd. Visualize. Crowds gathering in the stadium, but muted and orderly, no chaos. Scrolls of poetry held delicately, children copying letters on wax tablets. Drums and lyres playing softly, barely audible above the murmur of feet on stone. Gods under Roman eyes. Zeus, Athena, Apollo, and other deities continued to receive devotion, and Romans often syncretized their gods with Greek ones. Jupiter became associated with Zeus, Venus with Aphrodite, creating a cultural blend that allowed worship to persist without conflict. This quiet religious adaptation ensured that Greek faith remained alive even as Rome's influence expanded. Visualize. Altars with offerings of fruit and wine, untouched by time. Carved stone statues standing silently, shadows stretching across temple floors. Flickering oil lamps in sanctuaries, filling the rooms with a soft glow. Philosophers in silent colonnades. While politics faded under Roman control, Greek philosophy and education thrived quietly. Schools in Athens, Corinth, and Rhodes continued teaching rhetoric, logic, and ethics, their lessons almost invisible to Roman administrators. Knowledge passed from teacher to student, generation to generation, unaffected by distant political shifts. Visualize. Students sitting cross-legged on stone floors, wax tablets in hand. Philosophers pacing slowly, gesturing with calm precision. Wind rustling through open courtyards, carrying the faint scent of olive trees.
Temples as cultural anchors. Temples were more than places of worship. They were cultural centers, libraries, and community gathering spaces. Citizens came not only to pray, but to exchange news, debate ideas, and learn about their heritage. Rome allowed this continuity because it stabilized society, keeping local traditions intact. Visualize. Marble steps worn smooth by generations, echoing footsteps softly. Citizens exchanging scrolls and coins, their voices low and respectful. Columns casting long shadows, marking the passage of hours, slow and deliberate. Lessons for sleep and reflection. This period shows that cultural life can persist quietly, even under foreign rule. Temples, rituals, and festivals did not scream for attention, but they kept the essence of Greek identity alive. For a USA boring history audience, this is a perfect example of slow, reflective history, allowing listeners to visualize time passing gently. Visualize. Sunlight filtering through temple columns, dust motes floating in the quiet air. Ancient scrolls lying open, untouched, filled with wisdom of centuries. City streets empty at twilight, only the soft clatter of sandals on stone remaining. History here moves like a quiet river, carrying culture, faith, and knowledge through the invisible channels of time. Greek religion under Roman rule did not vanish suddenly. It flowed slowly, gently, and persistently, leaving traces that can still be felt today.
Part 20. Greek art and sculpture under Roman rule. Silent beauty preserved through time. By the 1st century CE, Greece had long been under Roman authority, yet its art and sculpture continued to breathe quietly, unaffected by the political shift. While Rome imposed governance, taxes, and infrastructure, Greek creativity and aesthetic expression endured, almost as if time itself had paused for statues, temples, and frescoes. Sculptures that spoke without words. Greek sculptors had created marble figures that captured humanity with astonishing realism. Romans, fascinated, often copied these works, transporting statues to villas and forums across the empire. Temples and public spaces displayed Greek figures of gods, heroes, and ordinary people, frozen in time, silent yet eloquent. Visualize marble Athena standing tall, helmeted, shield at her side, dust settling on her intricate details. Apollo's chiseled features, hair carved with delicate precision, gaze calm and eternal. Columns of temples reflecting sunlight, shadows stretching across stone floors. Frescoes and murals, stories on walls. Greek painters had decorated homes, public buildings, and sanctuaries with murals of myth, daily life, and nature. Romans preserved many by commissioning copies, carefully translating Greek style into Roman contexts. Colors were muted but deliberate: ochres, reds, deep blues, all capturing a serene story. Visualize a fresco of a quiet marketplace, citizens bartering in soft morning light, scrolls of mythological scenes, gods and mortals depicted in calm gestures, no chaos. Walls gently cracked with age, colors fading, yet still mesmerizing. Daily life in stone and clay. Beyond gods and heroes, Greek art depicted the ordinary rhythm of life: farmers in fields, fishermen mending nets, children playing in courtyards. Roman patrons, while importing Greek statues, kept them in gardens and atriums, allowing these scenes to quietly remind them of human effort and leisure. Life, captured in stone, became both decorative and contemplative, a reminder of time's passage. Visualize terracotta figurines of children playing, tiny hands holding miniature tools, garden statues bathed in soft sunlight,
moss slowly climbing the stone. Faint footsteps on marble floors, echoes of long ago citizens. Temples as hubs of art and learning. Temples served not only as places of worship, but as repositories of Greek culture. Sculptures, inscriptions, and painted reliefs taught history, philosophy, and mythology to those who visited. Even under Roman oversight, these spaces were quiet classrooms of the past, where art preserved ideas and memory. Visualize columns inscribed with dedications, sunlight filtering through carved capitals, visitors walking slowly, reading inscriptions, leaving without a sound. Soft wind moving through open courtyards, carrying the faint scent of olive trees and incense. Art as resistance in continuity. Greek art under Roman rule demonstrates resilience. Political power shifted, yet culture endured in silence. Statues of gods, athletes, and philosophers continued to influence Roman ideals, while Greek cities retained their unique identity through visual storytelling. This quiet persistence allowed Greece to remain culturally vibrant, even as Rome controlled governance. Visualize a marble Hercules, muscles tensed yet serene, shadowed by the columns behind him. Silent streets lined with statues, children peeking curiously, but no loud voices. Courtyards empty at dusk, only the soft sway of olive branches. Sleep-friendly reflection. Greek art under Roman rule did not scream for attention. It waited, quietly, to be seen and appreciated. For USA Boring History listeners, this is perfect for sleep storytelling. Slow, measured, and contemplative. Every statue, fresco, and carved stone is a lesson in patience, resilience, and the quiet endurance of human culture. Visualize moonlight on the Parthenon, casting silver shadows on the stone floor, marble statues glowing softly, dust settling in slow spirals, faint footsteps on marble floors, echoes of long ago citizens.
Part 21. Greek Daily Life and Homes. Quiet Continuity Under Roman Rule. By the 1st and 2nd centuries CE, Greece was politically under Roman control. Governors collected taxes, armies patrolled roads, and decrees moved slowly from Rome. Yet daily life in Greek cities, towns, and villages continued quietly, almost as if time moved differently here. The streets, homes, and markets were alive, but in a gentle, reflective way. This is a story of ordinary lives captured in extraordinary history. Homes that preserved memory. Greek homes ranged from modest one-room dwellings to large multi-courtyard villas. Walls were painted with murals of myth, nature, and everyday scenes. Even in smaller homes, frescoes covered the living rooms, showing gods at banquets, fishermen on the shore, or olive trees swaying in the wind. Furniture was simple yet functional: wooden tables, clay storage jars, benches, and low beds. These homes were not silent, they were quietly alive with the rhythms of domestic life. Visualize a sunlit atrium with a shallow fountain, pigeons drinking from the water, clay oil lamps burning softly, shadows dancing on painted walls, children sweeping floors, laughter muted, echoing gently. Markets, life in soft motion. Greek agoras, markets, were the heartbeat of daily life, yet under Roman administration they moved at a deliberate pace. Farmers brought grains, olives, figs, and wine. Artisans displayed pottery, jewelry, and bronze tools. The sounds were subtle, coins clinking, soft greetings, footsteps on stone slabs. Nothing rushed, everything followed a gentle rhythm. Visualize. Vendors arranging baskets of fruit, a breeze carrying the scent of oranges and herbs. Women bargaining quietly, hands brushing gently against clay pots. Statues of Hermes and Athena overlooking the market, observing in stillness. Education and cultural continuity. Even under Roman rule, Greek schools continued to teach philosophy, rhetoric, and mathematics. Teachers used wax tablets and styluses. Students memorized Homeric epics, geometry, and local histories. Cultural traditions were preserved within quiet courtyards, under olive trees or shaded porticos. Visualize. Students sitting cross-legged on stone floors, tablets balanced carefully. A teacher reciting Homer, gestures slow, voice calm. Columns surrounding the classroom, casting elongated shadows in the morning light. Work, trade, and quiet industry. Greek craftsmen maintained their trades, pottery studios, bronze workshops, and textile looms. Roman demand created steady commerce, but life maintained its soft tempo, never rushed. Workers' hands shaped vases, amphoras, and statues, dust drifting slowly in sunlight streaming through small windows. Visualize. A potter at a wheel, clay spinning, fingers shaping slowly. Bronze tools glinting, placed neatly after careful use. A loom in a quiet corner, threads stretched taut, rhythmic tapping of weaving. Religious and public life. Temples and sanctuaries remained central to daily Greek life, quietly teaching devotion and community. Priests and priestesses maintained rituals. Townspeople observed quietly. Gifts of grain, olive oil, and coins placed at altars. Even under Roman gods' influence, Greek religion persisted in subtle ways, quietly shaping morality, aesthetics, and social order. Visualize. A temple of Athena, incense curling slowly from the altar, columns reflecting late afternoon sunlight, steps empty except for a wandering citizen. Quiet votive offerings, small clay figures resting undisturbed. Why this story is sleep-friendly. Greek daily life under Roman rule does not shout or demand attention. It flows gently, slowly, as life does in quiet, enduring places. For USA boring history listeners, this is perfect for sleep narration. A story of ordinary people, ordinary work, and ordinary devotion, all preserved in time. The soft patter of footsteps, the glint of sunlight on marble, and the gentle hum of a market are quiet reminders of continuity and resilience. Visualize. A sunset over a quiet Greek town, shadows stretching across cobblestones, wind moving through olive trees, faint smell of earth and blossoms, a small fountain trickling, a marble child statue gazing thoughtfully, homes and workshops bathed in soft light, life preserved in stillness.
Part 22. Greece after the spotlight, when history became routine. By the time most people stop paying attention to Greece, nothing dramatic is happening anymore. There is no great battle, no sudden collapse, no final speech. Instead, there is routine. After centuries of philosophy, wars, empires, and ideas, Greece slowly becomes something very ordinary, and that is exactly why this part of history is often skipped. But ordinary life is where history actually lives, a land still alive, but no longer leading. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, Greece is fully absorbed into the Roman world. The cities are still there, the temples still stand, the roads are still used, Athens still teaches, Corinth still trades, Sparta still exists, though it no longer frightens anyone. Rome governs from afar, but daily life in Greece continues much as it always has. People wake up, they work, they eat, they sleep. The great thinkers are gone, but teachers remain. The famous artists are remembered, but craftsmen still shape stone and clay. History is no longer loud, it has become quiet maintenance. Education without revolution. Greek education does not disappear. In fact, Romans admire it deeply. Wealthy Roman families send their sons to Greece to study rhetoric, philosophy, and mathematics. Greek teachers become tutors for the Roman elite. But something changes. Education is no longer about discovering new ideas, it is about preserving old ones. Students memorize Plato, they quote Aristotle, they study Homer, not to challenge the world, but to understand what already exists. Greek thought becomes a foundation instead of a frontier. Religion begins to shift slowly. For centuries, Greek gods remain part of daily life. People still visit temples, offerings are still made, festivals still occur. But quietly, something else begins to spread: Christianity. At first, it arrives slowly and quietly. No sudden replacement, no immediate destruction. A few households convert, small gatherings form. Greek temples remain open, but slightly less crowded. The old gods are not violently overthrown, they are slowly visited less often. Religion, like everything else, changes through habit, not shock. Cities without ambition. Greek cities once competed fiercely: who had the best temple, the strongest army, the smartest philosophers. Now competition fades. Cities focus on survival and comfort rather than greatness. Roads are repaired, walls are maintained, markets function, but no one is trying to reshape the world anymore. The age of ambition has passed. Greek identity becomes cultural, not political. Greece no longer controls its destiny politically, but culturally it remains influential. Greek language continues to dominate education and administration in the Eastern Roman Empire. Greek remains the language of learning, medicine, and theology. People are Greek not because of power, but because of tradition. They inherit customs rather than create new ones. Time moves differently now. This is the Greece that most history books rush through because nothing dramatic happens. But this is the longest version of Greece that ever existed. Centuries of quiet continuity. Children grow up learning the same stories. Fishermen cast nets the same way their grandfathers did. Farmers plant olives knowing trees take decades to mature. There is patience here. History slows down. The world changes around Greece. While Greece remains steady, the wider world shifts. Rome struggles, borders weaken, new threats emerge. But Greece adapts quietly. It does not resist loudly, it does not rebel often. It endures. What this period teaches us: this part of Greek history teaches something uncomfortable. Most civilizations do not end with fire, they fade into routine. They stop inventing and start preserving. They stop expanding and start maintaining.
And that is not failure, it is aging. Greece is no longer young. By this time, Greece is ancient even to itself. Its greatest moments are already centuries old. People walk past ruins that were already ruins to their ancestors. Memory outweighs momentum. The calm before another transformation. This is not the end of Greece, but it is the end of Greece as the center of the world. Something new is forming, not suddenly, not violently, but steadily. The Roman Empire itself will change, and when it does, Greece will change with it. Quietly, patiently, as it always has. Part 23. Greece becomes the Byzantine world. When nothing ended, it just changed names. History often pretends that civilizations end, but Greece did not end. It continued under a different name. By the late Roman period, something subtle happens. The Roman Empire begins to divide, not with walls or wars, but with language, culture, and habit. The western half speaks Latin, the eastern half speaks Greek, and Greece lives entirely in the eastern half. The Roman Empire that felt Greek. To the people living in Greece, nothing dramatic seems to change at first. The laws are still Roman, the taxes are still collected, the cities still function. But daily life feels Greek. People speak Greek in markets, Greek is used in schools, Greek is used in churches. Even Roman officials governing the region often speak Greek better than Latin. Slowly, without an announcement, the Eastern Roman world becomes Greek in spirit. Constantinople, a new center, not a new beginning. In 330 CE, Emperor Constantine establishes Constantinople as a new capital. It is not built to replace Greece, it is built to depend on it. Greek architects design it, Greek scholars teach there, Greek philosophy shapes its education. Athens is no longer the center of power, but Greek thinking now influences an empire. Power moves north and east, culture remains. Christianity becomes Greek. Christianity spreads rapidly during this time, but it does not erase Greek thought. Instead, it absorbs it. Christian theologians write in Greek. They use Greek logic to explain Christian beliefs. They borrow language from Plato and Aristotle. This creates something new, a Christian world that thinks like Greece. Faith becomes philosophical. Debate becomes sacred. Greek reasoning now serves religion instead of politics. The temples do not all fall at once. Contrary to popular imagination, Greek temples are not destroyed overnight. Many are closed gradually. Some are repurposed. Some simply decay. People do not panic. They adjust. Old gods are remembered. New beliefs take their place. Religion changes the same way culture does, slowly. Daily life in Byzantine Greece. For ordinary people, life remains familiar. Farmers work land that has been farmed for centuries, fishermen follow seasonal rhythms, craftsmen pass skills from parent to child. The empire feels large and distant. What matters locally is food, family, and faith. This is not an age of innovation, it is an age of continuity. Greek cities without glory, but with stability. Cities like Athens, Thessaloniki, and Corinth continue to exist. They are no longer famous, they are no longer ambitious, but they are stable. Schools remain open, churches replace forums, libraries shrink but do not vanish. People still read, they just read fewer things. Education becomes preservation. Greek education survives, but its purpose changes. No one is trying to reinvent philosophy. Instead, teachers preserve classical texts. Copying manuscripts becomes sacred work. Memory becomes responsibility. Without this quiet labor, much of ancient Greek knowledge would disappear forever. Greece stops leading, starts holding. This is the defining shift. Greece stops being the engine of ideas, it becomes the archive.
a place where the past is carefully stored while the world moves on. This role is less glamorous, but more important than it appears. Time feels slower in Greece. Wars happen elsewhere, emperors rise and fall. In Greece, life continues. There is safety in routine, comfort in repetition. History no longer rushes, it walks. The empire is changing, even if Greece is not. While Greece remains steady, the empire faces pressure. Borders are threatened, resources are strained, but Greece adapts quietly. It has survived many rulers before. What this era really is, this is not decline, it is transformation without spectacle. The Greek world survives by becoming useful rather than powerful, by teaching instead of ruling. A civilization learns how to age. This period teaches a rare lesson. Great civilizations do not always collapse. Sometimes they learn how to live quietly inside larger systems. Greece does this better than most. The quiet foundation of the medieval world. Much of medieval Europe will later rediscover Greek knowledge, but only because Greece never stopped preserving it, not loudly, not proudly, just patiently.
Part 24. When the world pressed in, Greece under pressure, not collapse. History books often describe invasions as moments of sudden destruction, but that is not how it felt in Greece. In Greece, pressure arrived slowly, not as fire, not as chaos, but as weight. A world no longer protected by distance. For centuries, Greece had benefited from geography. Mountains slowed armies, seas controlled access, islands filtered movement. But by the late Byzantine period, this protection weakens. New peoples learn new routes, new powers learn patience. Pressure builds from multiple directions, not all at once. Slavic movements, not an invasion, but a migration. Beginning around the 6th century, Slavic groups begin moving south. This is often described as an invasion, but for most Greek villagers, it does not feel like war. It feels like strangers settling nearby. They clear land, they build homes, they farm. Some conflict occurs, much does not. Over time, coexistence becomes common. Greek identity does not disappear, it absorbs. The language holds longer than power. Greek remains dominant in cities. Churches teach in Greek, legal matters are recorded in Greek. In rural areas, other languages appear, but Greek does not vanish, it waits. Language becomes the quiet spine of continuity. Plague arrives without warning. In the 6th century, plague spreads across the empire. It does not target armies, it targets households. Villages empty slowly, cities lose rhythm. There is no explanation, no cure. People adapt by becoming quieter. Fewer people, fewer ambitions. After plague, Greece has fewer people. This changes everything. Less trade, less construction, less travel, but also less competition. Life becomes local. People think in seasons, not decades. The economy shrinks, not shatters. Markets still exist, but luxury fades. Coins circulate less frequently, barter returns. People value land, not money. This is not poverty, it is simplification. The sea is no longer safe. Piracy increases, trade routes become uncertain, coastal towns shrink, people move inland. The sea, once a connector, becomes a threat. Cities lose their voices. Athens still exists, but it no longer teaches the world. Its schools are smaller, its students fewer. Fame fades before function. Cities become places to live, not to impress. The church becomes the organizer of life. As imperial authority weakens, the church becomes central, not dramatically, not aggressively. It organizes festivals, it settles disputes, it stores grain. Faith becomes infrastructure. Monasteries replace academies. Education does not vanish, it moves. Monasteries become centers of learning. Monks copy texts, they preserve Greek works quietly. No one calls it a golden age, but knowledge survives. Greece learns how to endure without control. This is the key transformation. Greece is no longer directing events, it is enduring them. That endurance becomes its strength. External threats multiply. Arab expansion reshapes the Mediterranean. Trade routes shift. Constantinople is pressured. Greece feels this indirectly through scarcity, not invasion. Life becomes smaller but deeper. Families rely on each other. Communities shrink. Traditions deepen. Stories are told more often than plans. No one announces the end of an era. This is important. No one in Greece wakes up thinking, today we are no longer important. Importance fades gradually. Relevance becomes local. The past is still remembered. People still know they are Greek. They remember names, Homer, Plato, Alexander. But these are memories, not goals. Greece stops competing with the world, and in doing so, it survives. Pressure without collapse. Empires fall loudly. Greece does not. It bends, it absorbs, it waits. A civilization learns patience. This period teaches Greece something essential. Power is temporary, continuity is not. The long middle silence. For centuries, Greece exists in this state, not glorious, not destroyed, just present, a civilization breathing slowly.
Part 25. When Outsiders Passed Through. Crusades, Control, and Quiet Loss. History often describes the Crusades as dramatic events, battles, banners, victories, and defeats. But for Greece, the Crusades felt different. They did not arrive as a single moment, they arrived as a long disruption. Greece is no longer the center, it is the corridor. By the late Middle Ages, Greece is no longer directing history, it is standing in the way of it. Armies move through, traders pass by. Empires look at Greece not as a destination, but as a route. This changes how life feels. The Crusaders do not come to save Greece. This is important. Western Crusaders do not come to restore Greek power, they come for Jerusalem. Greece is simply in between. 1204, a turning point without recovery. The Fourth Crusade does not reach the Holy Land. Instead, it reaches Constantinople. The city is captured by Christian armies. This shocks the Greek world, not because cities fall, but because who took it? Trust breaks quietly. For centuries, Eastern and Western Christianity had drifted apart. After 1204, trust breaks completely. Greek communities do not riot, they withdraw. Greece is fragmented into pieces. After the sack of Constantinople, Greek lands are divided. Latin rulers control cities, Phoenicians control ports, local Greek leaders hold rural areas. There is no unified Greece, only zones of control. Life under foreign lords. For villagers, life changes slowly. Taxes are collected differently, laws are unfamiliar, languages shift in administration, but fields still need planting. Life continues. Greek identity becomes private. Greek culture moves inward. It is practiced at home, in churches, in family traditions. Public life belongs to others. Ports become valuable. People become secondary. Foreign powers value Greek ports. Athens matters less than its harbor. Corinth matters less than its position. Cities become assets, not communities. Trade benefits some, excludes many. Merchants profit, peasants do not. Foreign traders dominate commerce. Greek labor supports it quietly. The countryside carries the weight. Rural Greece keeps society alive.
Villages persist. They become conservative, stable, resistant to change. Education survives in shadows. Formal schools decline, but learning continues quietly. Monasteries preserve texts. Clergy teach literacy. Greek language survives without expansion. No large revolts, just endurance. There are uprisings, but most resistance is passive. People wait, they adapt, they remember. The Ottomans appear gradually. The Ottoman power grows east of Greece. At first it feels distant, then closer, then inevitable. Greek lands change hands without ceremony. Cities fall without major destruction. Local elites negotiate survival. Life adjusts again. The Ottoman system is predictable. For many Greeks, Ottoman rule feels harsh but stable. Taxes are high, religion is regulated, but communities are allowed to exist. This matters. The church becomes the anchor again. Under Ottoman rule, the Orthodox Church organizes Greek life, not politically, culturally. It keeps records, settles disputes, preserves language. Greece exists without a state. This becomes normal. Generations are born without knowing Greek independence. They know only village, faith, family. Memory replaces ambition. Stories of ancient Greece remain, but they are stories. No one expects restoration. A civilization learns to survive without hope. This is not despair, it is realism. People live, they marry, they harvest, they age. Silence as strategy. By not resisting loudly, Greece survives intact. Language survives, faith survives, identity survives. Outsiders rule, Greeks remain. Empires change, the people do not. The long preparation without knowing it. This era unknowingly prepares Greece, not for power, but for continuity. History moves on without asking Greece, and Greece lets it. Not a fall, a suspension. This is not collapse, it is suspension. A civilization waiting. Part 26. When Greece was remembered again, not by power, but by memory. For a very long time, Greece did not try to return. It did not announce itself. It did not demand attention. It simply existed, quietly. Europe looks backward and finds Greece waiting. By the late 1700s, something changes, not in Greece, but elsewhere. In Europe, scholars begin to look backward instead of forward. They read old texts, they study forgotten languages, they search for origins, and slowly they arrive at Greece. Not the land, the idea. Greece becomes a concept before it becomes a country. Europe does not discover modern Greece, it rediscovers ancient Greece. Philosophy, democracy, art, logic. These ideas travel across universities, not borders. Greece becomes symbolic. Meanwhile, real Greeks are still living quiet lives. This is important. While Europe romanticizes Greece, real Greek villagers are farming. They are not debating Plato, they are surviving. The gap between image and reality grows. Foreign writers imagine ruins bathed in sunlight. They imagine wisdom sleeping in stone. Actual Greece is poorer, quieter, more ordinary. The Enlightenment changes expectations. Ideas about freedom spread, about nations, about identity. For the first time in centuries, Greeks begin hearing a new word used seriously: independence, not as a dream, as a risk. Independence is dangerous. It invites war. Many Greeks hesitate. They have survived by being quiet. Why speak now? Memory awakens slowly. Stories are told again. Ancient names gain meaning, not as legends, as inheritance. Revolution is not romantic on the ground. When conflict begins in the early 1800s, it is messy. Villages burn, families flee, allies argue. This is not heroic, it is exhausting. Greece is not reborn, it is assembled. Modern Greece is not an empire, it does not control the world, but it controls its memory. Ancient glory becomes a quiet companion. Greek ruins remain, but Greeks do not live inside them, they live beside them. The long lesson comes into focus. Greece teaches history something rare. The civilization can lose power without losing itself. The world often forgets this. We assume importance means dominance. Greece disproves that. Greece outlasts its own peak. Empires rise higher, fall louder, disappear completely. Greece remains, not loud enough to fear, not strong enough to rule, but too deep to erase. Time moves forward. Greece moves with it. Modern Greece changes, it struggles, it adapts, but it never fully disappears again. What this story was really about. This was never just about Greece, it was about time, about how civilizations fade differently. Some collapse, some dissolve, some simply wait. Greece waited for centuries. And that is why it matters, because history is not only written by victors, sometimes it is preserved by survivors. Final pause. Nothing dramatic happens at the end of Greece's story. No final battle, no closing scene, just continuity. And so, tonight, as this story slows down, remember this. Greece did not fall asleep, it rested. It waited quietly while the world changed around it. And in doing so, it proved something rare, that history does not always belong to the loudest civilizations. Sometimes it belongs to the ones patient enough to remain. Good night.